So now it's about changing living organizations. This will be about measuring, evaluating it, understand that change, whether we can do that or not. The presentation has 4 parts. The first one will be a bit of a debate. We'll go through the debate on whether these things can be measured or not. Second, can we do it? And if we don't do it, can we afford not doing it? What would be the consequence? Yeah? Will we disappear if we don't measure, or we can go along like without measuring it? The third one is a tool that is called impact evaluation that already exists, that maybe could be useful for the thing. And the last part would be how, those of you that want to do it, how could you go and do it? Yeah? This is essentially. This is a statement, changing living organizations. If you cannot measure it, it does not exist. Now I would like to turn that into a question and to try to answer it together. Yeah? So if you, I mean, does it not exist if you cannot measure? Does it exist? Does it not? So let's see. Some before us have tried already to answer this. Yeah. First, I will do the overall debate, and then I will start narrowing it down until we arrive to changing living organizations. But this thing about measuring what it exists, or can we measure it, what doesn't exist, what it exists, this is a philosophical question. That's another idea that one to pass across. This is about ontology. Yeah? Ontology is a branch, ontologia, it's a branch of philosophy. So this is a philosophical question. Yeah? So it's about measuring reality, what exists, what doesn't exist. So it's a deep question. This is not a practical question. It's a deep question, and there has been plenty of thinkers about it. I started, this gentleman, Lord Kelvin, he was a mathematician and a physician, Irish, Scottish, that was born in 1924. But I'm sure that before him, there were other, trying to answering the questions. In 1883, in a master class, he said this. He said about, well, if you measure it, you know something about it. But then he said, but when you cannot measure it, or when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge of it, it's scant, it's meager. Yeah? And this is summarized into this. Usually he's quoted as, if you cannot measure it, then it is not science. Yeah? So actually we have here a vision. You cannot measure it, might be something, might exist, but it is not science. We jump a few years, yeah, till 2009 at The Atlantic. It's a Boston magazine. Avram Berhiz, he's a medical professor in university. In an article in The Atlantic, he said, well, and in the medical world that seems to be ruled by psychometricians, if it is not measured, if it ain't measured, he said it in American, if it ain't measured, it does not exist. So he went a bit further. So a quick recap. If you cannot measure it, we have, it's not science, and in the medical world, it does not exist. Now, let's narrow it down a bit more. What about in the business arena, yeah? In the corporate arena? What happens in there? Here what we have, I start with one of the probably gurus that we all know, Peter Drucker. Yeah, Peter Drucker said, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. Yeah, that's the first thing. Later on, he said also, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. And then he said, well, and if you cannot measure it, you cannot change it. Yeah? So in our case, this it, the pronoun, it's the change. Yeah? So if you cannot measure the change, you cannot change the change. Yeah? You cannot act upon it, you cannot manage it, and you cannot improve it. So that's the way Peter Drucker saw it. But also, to be fair, not everyone agrees with this. There are others that see it the other way around. One of them is William Edwards Deming. He's a guru on quality management, an American guru on quality management. In 1993, he wrote this book on the new economics, and on page 35, and I tell you the page because this is a very interesting quote. He said, it is wrong to suppose that if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. And this is a very costly myth. Yeah? So don't believe Drucker. It will cost you a lot of money to believe him. Why I told you the page in this book? Because this is one of the most wrongly quoted sentences in the world of business. You know why? Because the people that quote Deming delete the last part. So Deming is quoted very often as saying, if you can't measure it, you can manage it. When his meaning was absolutely the opposite. It is wrong to suppose this, it is a costly myth. So go to page 35 every time that you see Deming, you will see him as having said, you can't measure it, you can manage it. No, he said absolutely the opposite. And if you want to check out, go to page 35 of the book. the debate has gone on and on. In 2014, in the Forbes magazine, there was another article. It was from an economist journalist. If you can measure it, you can manage it. This is not true. So again, we're on the other side. What is the whole idea here of this article? Was measurement is our drug in the business world. So there are those who think it's a drug. And why? Because it's part of a fear-based process. We measure because we are afraid. We want to prove others that we did what they wanted us to do. That's why we measure. Yeah? There is also this side. So we have seen a bit like both sides of the debate. Now here I would like to point two aspects that I think are incredibly important on this debate about measurement. And one of them is that often when you read about whether it exists or not, and if it's manageable, if you don't measure it, or if you do, a lot of the debate is around key performance indicators, the KPIs that we've already talked about, having to do with observable, tangible, visible variables, yeah, or business metrics on these observable, tangible variables, and poor focus on the metrics of intangibles. So usually, it is assumed that if it's intangible, you cannot measure it. And that is not true. That is not true. Intangible things can be measured. Francesca already showed us a bit that some intangible things can indeed be measured. But that's another story. I will not continue over the line, but think that a lot of the debate is about, oh, intangible, then you cannot measure. No, you can measure intangibles. I just show you a little bit of over the last years, yeah? This New York Center for Global Development, they came up with this manual on managing enterprise intangibles last year. Then measuring and managing intangible variable drivers on the business strategy academic journals, or the real value of intangibles from Strategy and Business, which is a New York magazine. So of course you can, and there are manuals that teach you how. So if you had a doubt on that, there could be another 30 more. So intangibles can be measured. It's not about this. Also the debate goes into this, well, it's about confronting the use of data versus the use of intuition in decision making. And actually, Francesca has already touched upon this. Sometimes the debate goes into this, is one or the other. What Francesca did is to add them up. No, it is this and it is that. It's both things. So actually the dilemma is an intellectual dilemma, but it's not a real dilemma. Okay? But let's go to what we care about here, which is change and transformation in living organizations. So to me, now I'm framing the catchy sentence at the beginning into what is interesting to us, which is this he, it's a thee. So something happened here. Is it measuring change and transformational change of the essence? Is it really important? Can we live without it? Is it not being intuitive about those organizational changes that we carry in the companies? So the question is, can we afford just being intuitive? Because if we can afford, if we can go with this, why would you like to evaluate? Yeah? So we'll try to go onto these questions. So let's further the whole framing of the issue down into, but what is that we would like or we will need to measure? Are we thinking just about a few metrics to measure a few little things? What do we want to know about this change in living organizations? What we want to know is the what, this is very important, is the what, the how, and the why. Very often we stop in the what. That is where the metrics come in. Most of the metrics you see in business analytics are metrics about what, about the change, but not how do you get to that change. That has to do with the process, or about, these are process and mechanisms. The how is about mechanisms, and the why is about the drivers of that change, and that can also be measured. So here, we want to know the what. When we talk about measuring change, we're talking not only about the change, but about how you get there and why. What are the drivers? This is important. And another thing that, in particular, we want to know, sorry, there should be a slide here. Excuse me. Okay, you didn't open the updated one. Sorry. This is the old one. So there is a slide that I think it's, yeah. I wouldn't do that if that was not, I think, very important for the, because yesterday we had a discussion among the speakers, and plenty of things came up that made me think, it's better to reorganize. So I gave Joan an updated one, and of course, yeah, these things happen. I think you put it... No és l'aquí diu final. Deu estar, no?
No, la saps reconèixer?
Sí, l'has guardat aquí, es diu final. Jordi del Bas, número 7. Jordi del Bas, final. No veigues.
Posa final.
No. Aquí. No. Okay.
Aquest és el...
Okay. I don't have it here. See? You found it? Estava dalt amagada.
Ha aparegut, Came out.
Will you give me 2 more minutes, like in the football?
Yeah, but I'm measuring that.
Oh, you're measuring this, eh? Okay, you're measuring everything.
Okay, we go.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Okay, so what I wanted to show you, and I think this is very important. Here is the what, the how, and the why, but it's also it's also this, which is the framework. And I think now, from now on, for the rest of the presentation, try to keep this a little bit in mind. Okay, there we are the academics, consultants, coaches, and practitioners that try to bring organizational change, through organizational change programs, and these are us. And then we do our interventions to generate this transformational change. Then you have the changes, hopefully, these cultural transformation changes, and then there is another, this is called like the line of impact. There is a further impact on society, how these changes in the organization then have an impact, promote, generate further changes on the environment, on the economy, at a social level, and also emotionally, psychologically, on people, on people that are working in this company. So actually, this is the whole framework. So when we talk here about measuring change, it's about measuring not only the what are the organizational changes, or what are the impacts on society, but also the how and the why. And the how and the why goes right in the middle. You can already see that it's not the same to measure a what than to measure a why. So when we're talking about metrics, here the typical KPIs fail us. They fail us. And some of these mechanisms are invisible. Oh my God, then here we have the problem. So actually, this is what I would like to talk about this now. So 4 questions. The small circles are sub-questions, but the important ones are the big ones. Usually what we would like to know when we see this framework is, to what extent the changes that we see are attributable. I can attribute them to me, to that intervention. So actually, this is about that change in the organization would have happened without this intervention, without us, would have happened or not? This is one of the questions that we would like to know, I think. The second one is, has the intervention made a difference? Or it's what it's called in evaluation a dead weight, something that would have happened anyway, even if we were not there. We would like to know that. Has the intervention, our intervention to generate, those changes, made a difference? Did we make a difference or not? The third one is, how did we make that difference? What are the mechanisms and the factors? And the fourth one we usually ask is, okay, would this work elsewhere? So we've done it with this company, and it worked. So could we extrapolate that? Under which circumstances? These are the questions. And here you could disagree with me and say, no, Jordi, these are not the questions. Okay, then we enter into a discussion. But I think that these questions are very relevant in this framework of organizational change. Now, the thing is, how can we answer those questions? And suddenly you see that there is a discipline within evaluation that is called impact evaluation that answers those questions. Now, impact evaluation is not used to measure organizational change. Impact evaluation is a family of methodologies that is used in another field, which is the development aid field. But it answers all these questions. Now, why impact evaluation is used in development aid and not in the corporate world? One of the questions is, because effective development aid is all this huge amount of monies that flow from developed countries or from industrialized to the developing countries, that's the aid. So it's vast amounts of money going from one to the other. A few years ago already, they entered into a huge crisis. It was called the aid effectiveness crisis. So the big question was, is this money really effective? Are we making any difference? When we see a reduction of poverty in Malawi, is that because of the aid or is it because of government policies? And they had to answer those. So it was an existential crisis, a relevance crisis. Is international aid still relevant or not? And in order to answer those questions, and those questions were not asked by people like me. No, I'm no one. It was parliaments in countries, because this money, external aid, comes from the taxpayer pocket. So they had to answer those questions, and impact evaluation answers those questions. Now, how? This is only a bit of a quick overlook at this. Now I'm repeating the questions that I asked before. To what extent can the changes be attributable to the intervention or not? To answer this question, you might do a randomized control trial, a comparative case study-based design with evaluation participatory methods, and then econometrical methods like regression discontinuity design, propensity score matching, difference in difference, instrumental variance. There are several mechanisms that have been applied to international cooperation projects, development aid, and they have worked, and they do answer this question. To answer the question, has the intervention made a difference? You have a technique that is called contribution analysis that has been used already for the last 15 years to answer this question. By the way, these websites that I put you here, the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation and the JPAL, the Poverty Lab Action, they use all these methodologies that I'm teaching you to answer all these questions. And they have, everything is open source. They have hundreds and hundreds of evaluations using those methods to answer these questions. So you can use process tracing and theory of change. This is usually analyzed, that last question that you got, Francesca, about what about the how, the mechanism, how all these changes in the team affect performance, yeah, what happens in the middle. That's what theory of change and process tracing does. They're a toolbox that answers this question. Or the QCA, the qualitative comparative analysis, that's another of the methods. To answer how the intervention has made a difference, you have realist evaluation and also participatory, and again, process tracing and theory of change. And to see if it's replicable, you have realist evaluation that answers what works in an intervention, for whom, why, and under which circumstances. Things that we would like to know also when it comes to change in living of an organization. So actually, concluding, the issue at stake is, can we afford, and this is a reflection, okay? Can we, consultants, practitioners, people from the academic world, afford not answering these questions? Yeah? Can we afford not measuring these changes in culture, in behavior, and in performance to measure the what, and how, and the why? Can we afford only measuring the what, but not the how and the why? I've done this reflection, I've reflected. My personal opinion here is that you cannot afford it. And for one reason, it is not really about whether this change exists or not. This is not what it is about. So change in living organizations may exist even if you don't measure it. It does exist, it is there. And you feel it, we feel it, yeah? Because measurement comes from different ways. You feel it is there. What you cannot afford is not measuring it. Why? Because if you don't measure it, what might be at risk is your mere existence as organization, because you cannot prove the value. You cannot prove that you're contributing to that change, and you do not understand how you are contributing to that change, the mechanisms. You're completely blind. And as it happened with development aid, I see the risk here. So the thing is, change in living organizations, if you cannot measure it, I don't exist, because I cannot prove it. I cannot prove my contribution to it, the drivers to it. What is that I do that it's part of this process? I cannot answer the 4 questions before. Now, what do you need then to do that? Okay, so what do you do? What do you need? The basics are, you need data. You need data. And I would like to nicely link this with Francesca's presentation. Data has to do with business analytics, all these huge amounts of data that Francesco was talking about that companies have, the hard data, and also people analytics. Already in the MIT in Boston, in the university, they are starting with this subject that is called people analytics. It's hard data and soft data and tangible and intangible data on people, on how they feel, like the tool, the EQ team that Francesca showed us, how they feel. Are they stressed? Are they not stressed? Do they go to work in time? They don't? How many conflicts are in the company? All this is people analytics. So we might have vast amounts of data that could allow us to apply those methods. What else do we need? Well, these methods. Impact evaluation, from my point of view, is one of the ones that is targeted to this. And then you need expertise. And the expertise might be already in your companies, in the companies. You may have it in-house. Or in academic institutions. Business schools, I think, have a crucial role in this regard. The thing is that in-house companies and academic institutions sometimes have to be bridged. So we need a bridge. This is another of the aspects that we need here. And the last one, so we need the data, the methods, the expertise, bridging academic world with companies, and what else? Most importantly, I would say, the culture. So to measure changes in culture, what do you need? A culture of measuring. And one of the reasons why, if you ask me, this is not happening broadly, is not because there's no data, it's not because there's no methods, and it's not because there's no skills. What we don't have is this culture of measuring the how and the why above. We measure the what, but we measure the what as a proxy of performance, yeah? To give bonuses to people, not the what, the why and the how, for learning and to understand how this change is happening. So here, the shift from a culture of not measuring to a measuring culture, from my point of view, is absolutely the basic. So in order to measure cultural change, the first thing you need is a cultural change, but in measuring. Yeah, that would be it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jordi.